So I hope that new mothers will realize it's hard. It's going to be hard. That's what normal is. That's what it is. I wish it wasn't true. I wish it wasn't that way. But that's the reality of things. But it does get better. Good morning. This is Gina with Quiet Cottage Moments. And thank you so much for joining me here in my cottage kitchen. It is Friday morning, the 28th of August, and I'm so happy that you're here. I do have my coffee and the pleasure of your company, and I'm very blessed to have both. Let's take a sip and we'll get started. Oh my goodness. So yesterday I talked a little bit about Lindsay Clancy and the trial and what my opinion of it was. And I mentioned postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, postpartum experiences. And I wanted to share a little bit about my experiences as a mother of 4. And I know my experiences are not everyone's experiences, but this is what I can speak to because this is what I lived. And my children were born in the 80s, early 80s, mid 80s, and the late 80s. And I don't remember much being spoken of as far as postpartum depression, psychosis. I don't think they called that for quite a while. But I'm here to tell you that motherhood, motherhood in general, but also that, especially that postpartum period right after you give birth, is hard. It's very, very hard. It's very difficult, but that doesn't mean it's not a beautiful experience. That doesn't mean that you you sleep well, you have like all this wonderful time, and it's difficult. There are very precious moments when you're holding your child, when you're nursing your child, when you're caring for your child. And in spite of the hardships, in spite of the lack of sleep, in spite of a fussy baby, you can deal with it. And there are people that have mental issues who perhaps struggle more through that time period. But I pray that they have some kind of support system to help them. But it never is an excuse to hurt your children. There's no excuse in my book. There's no excuse. Excuse me for clearing my throat. I was outside, and I think at the end of the summer there's, I don't know what pollen or whatever is floating around out there. So my first birth experience, my first postpartum experience, is different than probably many people because I had twins. And I was 22 years old. We didn't know I was having twins until I was 8 months pregnant, even though I was huge. I'll see if I can find that picture and insert it, and you'll see how huge I was. I was in not the best physical shape because I had been thin to start with, and then I had, my babies were 1.5 and 6.5 pounds and ounces. And I carried them to full term and then some. They were like 5 days late, if the dates were correct. So we found out when I was 8 months pregnant, they did a sonogram, and sure enough, ultrasound. They didn't do them on a regular basis back then, but they did do one, and surprise, surprise, 2 babies in there. And I did have a C-section with them. So you have the healing of your abdominal surgery, which is serious surgery. You have the healing from that, and now you have two babies. Not one baby, but two babies. And you're young, and you have almost no money. But those were wonderful days. Don't get me wrong. I was very excited to have twins, and they are identical twins. But I can tell you that it was rough. It was rough. I think the difference between now and then is there is one thing that's very different, very important. The difference is we did not have social media. We didn't even have the internet. So I think that social media is a terrible thing to be on when you're postpartum, when you're pregnant, when you're postpartum and your children are young. That's what I think. Whether it's on social media, whether it's watching social media, I think it's detrimental. I think it takes away time from the reality. It takes away time from you spending time with your new child, new baby or babies and husband. There's a lot of changes that happen when you have a baby of your own. It all seems so simple before you have your first child. You think you know everything, but it's completely different than what maybe perhaps you thought. And looking at social media, scrolling through at the perfect Instagram reel or the Facebook posts or the YouTube videos or the YouTube shorts, whatever, or the TikTok now, and seeing lovely birth experiences and talks and like that, that can really mess with you, because the reality is it's hard. It's beautiful at sometimes, but mostly it's hard. And when you watch things like that, people's perfect little stories, you compare it to your own, and it makes you look like there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with your child. There's something wrong with your husband. My life is not like this Instagram reel or this YouTube video or this TikTok, whatever that is. And it messes with your head. It's not healthy. Because 99% of the time, people aren't showing you reality on social media. I try to show you reality. I try to balance it with talking about hard things and talking about blessings, because life is a mixture of both. But as I said before, I think there are a lot more hard things than there are easy things. There are a lot of you can go through those hard things with a contentment, with a thankful heart, with gratitude, if you know God. And maybe if you don't know God, I don't know. I know God, so I don't know how to compare that. But I think it's a lot harder when you don't see the big picture, the big picture. And I think that is so detrimental. I see that. I see little mothers. I see young mothers. I see them on their phones. Not everyone, but a lot of them on their phones, looking at things, on their phones, texting, on their phones, whatever. And you see them as they're pushing their little stroller along, or if they're at a coffee shop and their child's having a cake pop. But instead of the mother talking to the child, she's strolling on her phone. The kid's just looking around, or with babies, or with a little older children, or at restaurants. And I think you cannot get that time back. Unless there's a dire emergency. I don't understand why mothers and fathers, when they're in the presence of their children, are on their phones. texting? What is so important? What is more important than spending time with your child? I get off my soapbox now. So back to my postpartum experience. I think that's mothers nowadays, get off of it. Get away from your phones, unless it's very important. I mean, it's so easy to be nursing your baby and think, okay, I could be looking at my phone. I could be looking at this reel. I could be looking at this thing. Because your baby's nursing and you're there. But if what you are taking in is making you feel bad about your life, is making you feel like I'm not good enough, or why isn't my baby doing this now? Why isn't my baby sleeping through the night? This baby's sleeping through the night. It's just bad on every level, I think. Now back to my experience. We didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones, and the first few weeks, especially after my twins were born, were very rough because I had lost a lot of weight. So I weighed almost 10 pounds less after my twins were born than before I was pregnant. So I was very gaunt, and that it took me longer to get back on my feet than, even though we had a C-section, I had a C-section, than it would have if I hadn't lost so much weight. And I am very blessed that we did have family in the area. And I remember especially one night, my mother-in-law and a friend of the family came over and spent the entire night, one night, so that I could actually sleep. Because with the twins, they were awake at different times of day. So they would, at that point, they were either nursing or having a supplemental bottle every 3 or 4 hours. And when babies are so little, they tend to fall asleep when they're nursing. And so you have to try to wake them up. And what possibly could be a nursing time that might take 25 minutes, 30 minutes, it takes way more than an hour and a half. By the time you get the baby up, you change the baby's diaper, the baby's clothes if it needs to be changed, the baby's sheets if it needs to be changed. You nurse the baby, and at that time you've got to change the baby again. Maybe the baby's closing in, and burp the baby, possibly get the baby to go to sleep. There was probably an hour before the next baby woke up. And then you do the same thing. And by the time you're done and getting the second baby back to sleep, the first baby's up. So it was very little sleep. And it was very, very difficult. But we did have family that helped us. And if we had not, we would have gotten through it. But those days and weeks are a little bit of a blur. I remember it, but it almost feels surreal. And at no time did I ever want to do anything that could possibly hurt my children. I loved them. Was I in the same frame of mind as I had been before I was pregnant? Of course not, because you have no sleep. You have your body's trying to get back its strength from after having had, like 12 and a half pounds of baby, and you only gained about 20 pounds, 25 pounds. I think it was 22 pounds I gained. So I lost a tremendous amount because with the amniotic fluid, the placenta, all of that, and big babies, it was a lot. And I remember when I was expecting my third daughter. The twins were 3 years old, and I was very, very ill. All my pregnancies, I was very ill. They didn't really call it what they call it now, but I just was nonstop vomiting. It was an all-day thing. It lasted at least the first trimester, if not the second trimester. And even the day that I gave birth to my third daughter, I was vomiting that day. In fact, when they had to do another C-section, I was vomiting during the C-section. That's not fun. Trust me on that. And between the first birth experience and the second birth experience, one of my children became gravely ill, and it was a continuous health issue that we dealt with for many, many years, and she would end up in the hospital 2-3 times a year. And so I had that, and I had my third daughter, and that postpartum was different. Every postpartum experience is different. That one, we still don't know what went wrong, because when I was in the recovery room after the C-section, I almost bled out. My blood pressure dropped. They had to do, I was just, through the catheter, I was just bleeding out. And my doctor rushed to the hospital, and I had 2 choices. He was going to try and give me numerous blood transfusions to see if that would stop whatever was bleeding internally, or he would have to do a hysterectomy, emergency hysterectomy. So we opted for the first one, and I'm trying to think how many actual blood transfusions. I think there were 4. There might have been 3, but I think there were 4. And thankfully, my husband and my siblings, they had donated blood either ahead of time or afterwards. That really helped me, because at that time, that was during the AIDS. People were really afraid to get blood from strangers because of AIDS and stuff. So I actually had blood from people I knew. That's just, you had a choice with that. So thankfully I did have that, but I was in the recovery, because you go to your surgery, you're in the recovery room, usually 24 hours or 12 hours or something, and then you go to a regular room, hospital room. I was in the recovery for, I think was there 3 days, because they didn't think I was going to make it. And I had this huge hematoma all over my abdomen, this huge black and blue bruise from where the blood had accumulated inside. Anyway, that was that. Now going home and getting back my strength and taking care of another newborn and 2 3-year-olds and all of that, that was hard, because motherhood is hard. It isn't picture perfect little, reels or videos. It's not. There are moments of that. And trust me, I love my children, and I would not change having all of them. But it is hard. So we had more medical issues, and I was told I shouldn't have another child because of all of what happened. And thankfully the blood transfusions did work. Didn't have to have a hysterectomy. And then within 2 years I was expecting again. And that was the same pattern, all the morning all day sickness for months, and trying to raise 3 children at that point as well, and take care of your home, take care of your husband, all of those things that I loved doing, but it was hard. It was really hard. But not once did I ever think, okay, there must be an easy way out. No, I did not. And so then when when my son was born, the doctor said, you cannot have any. You should not. You're going to die. So we did make the decision I made a decision to have my tubes tied after that, because although I would have loved to have more children, the doctor said, no. Wasn't happy I was pregnant the fourth time, or the third time with the fourth child. And postpartum with that, again, was a struggle, because you have a newborn, you have a 2-year-old, and then you have the twins, I think were 7. 2 7-year-olds, a 3-year-old, or she was almost 3, and then a newborn. And then you've got medical issues with asthma and eczema and all sorts of things dealing with this, aside from all of this. And we pushed through. My husband helped me a lot, and family helped me a lot, but we pushed through. So did I have days where I felt like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Yes, of course. I remember one time I was pregnant with my third daughter, and the twins, was that, let's see, no. The twins were babies. That's right. I'm thinking a different time. The twins were, probably 6 months or so. And of course, when one baby woke up and cried, it woke the other baby up. And at one point, and I could only hold one at a time. I mean, I could kind of hold one on each hip, but I couldn't feed them. I couldn't feed them and hold them two of them at the same time. It just didn't work. I was just a little thing. I'm a bigger thing now, a bigger Nana now. But back then I was probably too thin. And I remember calling my mother and saying, oh my gosh, the babies are crying. They're crying. I don't know what to do. I tried this. She said, are they in their cribs? I said, yes. Actually, at that point, they were in one crib. I had one. They couldn't really roll over. I guess they could roll over a little bit. I had one on one side of the crib and one on the other side, because we couldn't afford 2 cribs. We had 1 crib. Somebody gave us a crib later on. And she said, if their diapers are clean, they've been fed, just leave them in their crib and go outside and just sit down and have, breathe the fresh air, touch the grass. They didn't say that back then, but just step away, because the babies weren't going to hurt themselves. They were safe, they were fed, they were dry. And sometimes you have to do this. Sometimes you just have to step back and breathe, because sometimes you can't, it's a lot. When your baby's crying, or your babies are crying, it's a lot, because you want to help them. You want them, you don't know what, they're so little, they can't tell you what's wrong. They're not teething, they're not hungry, they're not wet, they don't have a burp, you try everything. Sometimes they just have to cry a little bit. And maybe if I'd had just one, I would have been able to just hold the baby all day long and the baby wouldn't cry. But I couldn't do that. I didn't have the choice. So postpartum is not for sissies. Motherhood is not for sissies. And women need to realize that those difficult times will pass. They may not feel like it's going to pass. I remember feeling like, what am I going to do? But after stepping back, like my mother said, take a breath, I was ready to go forward. My mind was clearer, but in no time did I ever think of hurting them. No. I don't think someone that is a good mother would ever do that. I don't care what kind of psychosis or whatever they're saying. That's a no. And if a mother had tried something in the past, I got a comment. I didn't post it because it was very graphic and upsetting. But someone had said, well, my mother did this, and then my mother tried to hurt me this way and tried to hurt me this way, and then went and had shock treatments, and then she was a good mother. And I'm thinking, no way in HE double toothpicks would I ever allow my grandchild or if I were the husband, my child alone with that woman, regardless if she had shock treatments. If this whole story is true, which I doubt that this is true. This person went on, and it was a lot. But that was justifying that, she was having problems, and she was a bad mother, but now she's a good mother. No, there's no excuse to do that to your children. There's no excuse to hurt them, to attempt to do worse. So I hope that new mothers will realize it's hard. It's going to be hard. That's what normal is. That's what it is. I wish it wasn't true. I wish it wasn't that way. But that's the reality of things. But it does get better. And you need to ask for help. And people around them need to listen to them. Need to take measures. If they're saying, like I was watching more of the Lindsay Clancy trial, and her mother admitted that in the month before the worst things that happened, she told her mother and her husband, I have thoughts of hurting them. But they didn't do anything. So, a lot of people are responsible. But, as I said yesterday, there's only one person that actually did the physical harm. And, anyway. But I did want to share about the postpartum, and I'll see if I can find that picture because, oh my gosh. It looks like Ripley's Believe It or Not. I looked like a prisoner of war. I was so thin. And that's because all the nutrients were going to the babies. And that's what happens, is your body feeds them, takes care of them first, which is as it should be. But with all the... I couldn't keep down food, couldn't keep down liquids, couldn't keep down a lot of things, and it was rough. But God got us through that, and God can help people get through those hard times. And that's my video for today. Thank you for watching, and God bless you this day. Bye-bye.